now turn the floor over to Jennifer Howard-Grenville, who will take the baton from here. Jennifer, we can't hear you. Is your sound on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have been teaching, and so I had to run up, restart my laptop. EduRoam wasn't working well in one part, and now it's working. So I'm sorry to join the conversation late. I was here for the end of Bess's comments and Aaron's comments, and I would say completely amplify and applaud all of the pieces that they've said, many of which I would also say. So there were a number of questions posed as potentials, and I guess one of them is, how do I think about challenges in publishing qualitative research? And so I don't want to be too repetitive with the prior speakers, but I think all of us who have had editorial experiences have both faced these challenges ourselves and also seen these challenges arise time and time again. And so I'll say in a moment one of the ways that I've addressed those challenges, but I think the key thing to recognize is that as a qualitative researcher, you tend to become, you do become an expert in that area, right? So I like Beth's analogy with a subway map, but mine never really looks like a subway map. It looks like, it doesn't look like neat lines, or at least not for a very, very long time. We get attached to not just our documents, our sort of interview transcripts, the words of the individuals, but we get attached to the place and the people and the experiences, and we should. And I think those are strengths. I think one of the trends I've seen in qualitative research is, yes, we're becoming more transparent, but we're also so worried about showing everything that sometimes we forget that our experience being there and being them, as John Van Manen might say, if you're doing observation or ethnography or a component of that, is also data. Yes, we need to convey what we discovered through that, how we're supporting it with other evidence that might be documented in a different way. But I think that there are ways that you as a qualitative researcher not only should get overwhelmed, you will get overwhelmed, and don't shy away too quickly from that overwhelm. So yes, produce the subway map. Once you've iterated, and I think others would agree with this, it takes a long time to get there, but also acknowledge and accept, and in fact, bring into your writing a more holistic sense of the place and the issues. I still remember a time when I was handling a paper as an editor. This was 2013 to 16 at AMJ. And it was a lovely and interesting paper where the people had been there, were immersed in the setting, were talking about the importance of that particular setting as it related to the theorizing, yet were, as we all tend to do, evidencing everything through interview quotes. And at some point I wrote as an editor, I said, you were there. Bring that experience in somehow, which, I spoke subsequently with the author who said, well, that freaked us out, because the answer is we're not really used to that. So I think we need to be both systematic, transparent, and clear in all the ways that have been laid out, but also accept that at some point, actually, as qualitative researchers, this sense of what we're seeing and why we're seeing it and how things all fit together, we need to be able to convey that authentically, yet systematically. So that's one thing, which is, and for me, I always talk about an accordion. So an accordion is, I think, like Bess's subway map, but it's a bit more temporal. A lot of the work that I've done, you have so much data, it doesn't fit into anything initially, but you find, at least I find, I tend to want to tell stories about first this happened in time, then this happened in time, then the other happened in time. And as you go through the refining the data process and really understanding your story and working with the reviewer feedback, you start to see that actually some areas of that temporal story, for example, are worth more attention and effort and are frankly just more interesting and important to the theory development. So much like an accordion can be compressed fully or extended fully, I think about it as sort of which are the components that would extend and that we need to breathe life into and really focus on in the paper, and which are the components that might be important because we're telling a temporal story and we need to understand a certain phase or process first, but we can compress those like an accordion sort of leaves. And so I think about that in terms of the level of zoom, but I do love the subway map as an alternative way of thinking about that. So I guess what I'm saying is embrace the authenticity of your experience, because that, for me anyway, often gives me the nuggets of what's truly interesting here. And if I think about it, the pieces of the accordion that you pull out and that you lean into and that reviewers say, tell us more, tell us more, tell us more, those are the things that you felt, you know, sometimes in a very embodied way, as were really important from the get-go sometimes. Not always, but we have these hunches, we have these inklings, and I think we need to also allow those to be present in the data analysis process and work on bringing those through in the publication process. I'm going to, I could share my screen. I don't have slides, but I've just pulled up a paper that I wanted to share with you, which was a response that I have offered along with colleagues, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling at you. This is something I wrote when I was on my last term at AMJ as deputy editor with my wonderful qualitative editors, Heather Vo, Tamar Zilber, and Andrew Nelson. And it's always hard, especially with all these esteemed people in the room who've written so much about qualitative analysis. And we were really responding to this feeling that, you know, on the one hand, many of us feel obligated to think about, you know, the standards of qualitative research and ensure that our work put forward for publication fits certain standards, which you know are important, but there's no formula. And on the other hand, there's this sort of rising attention to transparency so that we know, as other speakers have said, we know how you got from your data to your theorizing and your insights. Also, given the plethora of good work out there on qualitative analysis, we didn't want to repeat things, but we started thinking about what we call fit as internal coherence. So does a paper fit together? So I apologize that I'm scrolling, but here's our little process model. It's not really a process model. It's just a way of capturing the things that we mention in this editorial. And the first question is Erin's question. Can the research question be addressed by the data? And also in relation to that, what stance is adopted and are the data collected to suited to those? So, you know, are you taking a stance that would require having a certain type of insight from your informants and have your data actually enabled that type of insight? Because even if the research question looks right, it might not actually be right if you're collecting data that is all about how people narrate things, but you're really attending to how people, you know, feel things, which might be a different approach. And then I won't bore you with it because you can go and look it up if you choose, but our mapping is not very clean, but we're just pointing out that every single piece of the paper in some way is obviously connected to the other pieces. And we just go through systematically with our experience on the editorial team at AMJ, the kinds of common things that we see. And so these are sort of seemingly basic questions, but you know, I think this relates to my first point. As qualitative researchers, we get so invested, so interested, so enamored by what's going on in the field that we do sometimes want to just say it all, that we're meanwhile trying to be transparent, advance theory, and sometimes, as my co-author says, the seams start showing. So it doesn't really fit together in the way that it all might have or could do. And that's part of the process too. And so I think as you write a paper, and I do this all the time, you reach the end and you think, well, hold on a minute, we have to go back and rewrite the literature review because we thought we were going to, you know, do X. But actually now that we've gone down that journey, we need to come back again. And so this is a handy set of questions that you can ask yourself, not just at the beginning of a research project, not just throughout analysis and and data collection, but also at the writing and just before you submit stage, which is actually note to myself because I want to submit a paper soon, just to really be honest with yourself that actually do the things that we say we're doing all fit together at the end of the day, because there are many choices, as you know, that have to be made. In fact, one of the comments I got early on in a paper of mine from a very senior editor in our field, very respected qualitative researcher, was a very sweet way of saying in the letter. They said, I really like the points that you're raising in the discussion. I think these are thoughtful and interesting. I have no idea how any of that showed up in what the findings were. I mean, it wasn't quite that way, but this question 4 and 5 of is what you're actually saying evidence through the findings? Have we had consistent labeling? How, are these ideas too close to the data, but also too far from the data? So anyway, I'll stop sharing now and go back to, do I have a minute or two? Okay. I just wanted to drop in a question because there's other questions in here about how do you disseminate, how do you choose to disseminate? And increasingly, I feel like journals are wonderful. Publish your work in journals. It's rigorous, it's important, but is it necessarily impactful in all the ways that you need to be? Again, as qualitative researchers, we have the capacity to be in touch with the people we study, to not just check that they understand our language and interpretations and that this resonates with their world. That's an instrumental way of ensuring that our analysis is good. But I think in my teaching, I'm increasingly talking about early findings, just stories from the field. For example, I reflect on the papers I've written over the years in new ways. So both in my in-classroom teaching, in the executive education that I do, because I'm doing a lot of work around sustainability and culture because of the moment that we're in right now. And I find that incredibly enriching for just, I don't know if it's impact, and I don't necessarily cite chapter and verse on a given academic publication, but I'll distill some of these ideas. And what's so interesting to me is the same ideas and nuggets supported by the stories from the data that I bring forward in the classroom and that often resonate and then I often can build on and think about in relation to the comments I get. Those are the same nuggets I had when I was in the field. Those are the pieces of the expansion of the accordion that we really leaned into because our hunch was there's something important going on here. So I think we need to also think as scholars and academics, impact doesn't mean like, oh yes, I got this in HBR and, wonderful and in the FT or in the New York Times or on the radio. Impact is how do we actually take the rigorous knowledge that we and others have built over time. It's not one paper, but over time. And how do we help introduce others to those ideas in ways that they both might feed back to us, how that resonates, how we might think about that in the future, but also impact how they think about their own organizational lives. So I'm increasingly thinking about and encouraged by that. Having gone through periods of my career where I've thought of the research and teaching enterprise as very disconnected, I now see it as just they're just two sides of the same coin. So I will stop there. And I just saw the comment in the speaker. Yeah, editors are people too. Authors who've written your favorite paper, they're people too. We've all been rejected. We've all had comments from editors that go, oh yeah, that was a bit embarrassing, and that makes us better. The only way to success, or I think one of the best ways to success in this field is truly caring about your data, truly caring about the quality of your work, and getting, just persistence, get back in the saddle, get back on the horse when you get feedback that maybe doesn't feel great, because that's your biggest opportunity for learning and improvement. So thank you.